We designed this presentation together with my colleague to show you some of the security challenges that we are facing in gaming industry, both as a traditional enterprise, but also looking from the player perspective and from our products, our games perspective. So,
all right, awesome. Hello everyone, my name is Rizwan. I was only actually supposed to do half of this presentation, but since Mihai lost his voice just last night, I'm just gonna cover it all. So let's get into it. All right, I'm gonna do the introduction for you to save you a bit of health on your voice. So Mihai is our Director for Security Operations here out of EA Romania. He basically manages the whole SOC as far as EA Global goes. So today we wanted to present a few of the more unique security challenges that a gaming company has. I mean, security in general is pretty broad, and a lot of companies, regardless of their business, actually cover various aspects of it, right? So malware is a problem for everyone, but obviously each industry also has its own specifics. So I'm gonna take 2 points of view. The first one is from a SOC/enterprise security level, and the other one is basically where I fall in, which is the application security area, let's say. So, getting into it, video games have been growing tremendously in terms of business. A recent study basically places gaming as the biggest entertainment category globally in terms of revenue, profits. Articles about the gaming industry, some snippets from Reuters and Forbes. The Forbes snippet discusses FIFA. As you can see, the discussion was around the fact that it generates nearly $800 million a year just by itself. Obviously, FIFA is one of the titles that we have in our portfolio. And so there's another aspect here that I thought was really interesting. They mentioned that China has a 50-point plan to turn the country into a $800 billion sports industry with focus on soccer. So this implicitly means that if China grow and kind of market soccer inside of their own country, implicitly FIFA and other titles that do soccer will grow with it. So compared to television, at the time of this study, about 11 billion more, which is quite significant. So what are the problems in essence from the security perspective? A small snippet on top discusses an interesting case that was recently wrapped up, an attack against the Xbox network by a few exceptional but misguided young men. They basically figured out some vulnerabilities and were managing to falsely create in-game currency. Now, for those of you who are unaware, you have various types of currencies that you earn by playing the game, and you spend it for various items within the game. So in this case, they found a vulnerability that allowed them to actually pipe into a database and just generate value constantly and then sell it on the black market, because obviously there's also a black market for in-game consumables, any type of game you can think of. If there's trading, there's gonna be a black market. So we are significant targets. I think 3 major types of attackers or motivations behind an attack are the main culprits for us. Embarrassment, so obviously, hey, EA has really bad security or something along the lines is their final goal, most of the times. Collateral damage from stuff like WannaCry or other more advanced malware threats that somehow hop the perimeter into our network and damage us as well. And APT-style motivations, which are direct financial gain by somehow getting a foothold inside of the network and being able to do various things, like, for example, generate some coins that you can then trade and sell on some sort of black market. But there is one difficulty or one really important thing that differentiates us from, for example, a defense industry business or a bank. The fact that we need to keep our environment very dynamic. We need to allow developers and content creators that work for EA to be able to develop and create new content. And that's not always easy. You can't just lock everything down, because then you're going to have 10, 15, 20 incidents a day where some developer was trying to use a tool, a plugin, something extra, apart from the basic stuff that you whitelisted, and he can't because something is blocking it. You don't want that overhead when 90% of your company is writing code and developing and building very complex software at the end of the day. So in short, since we can't run security like a defense industry business or like a bank, we need to get creative. We need to find innovative solutions, let's say, to fix some of the problems that other industry members regularly fix just by enforcing some really solid walls, for example. Let me just talk about an interesting case that we have as a gaming company, which is pretty much uncommon anywhere else other than a gaming company. Consoles, right? PS4, Xbox. Everybody's familiar with them, but you might not necessarily be familiar with the development process that you must go through to actually build and release a game on one of these consoles. Now, some of you may know next year, 2020, is the release of the new generation of consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox console. And obviously, being EA is partners with Sony and Microsoft because we release games on these platforms, so they kind of have to prepare us in advance. Hey, this is the new console. You want to start building your title for it probably a year and a half in advance of when it actually launches, so that when the console hits the market, you actually have something to run on it and quote unquote exploit all of the hardware goodness that's contained in the new generation, right? So we receive what are known as dev kits. These are consoles those ones. So they replicate the hardware one-to-one. It's exactly the same thing that you would get in the commercial version, only packaged in a generic case because the designs are not finalized and running software that gets updated frequently. But that allows you to start your development process and to start working on it. These are a big problem from a security perspective. First of all, on the black market, they're like hot stuff because they lack certain protections and they offer developers special kinds of access inside, like, towards the innards of them. So basically, let's say to the ring 3 level at most, and potentially even ring 0 depending on what kind of development you're doing. They have a web interface where you can like run some scripts, get diagnostics, remote accessing, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, because they are dev kits, they're fully configurable so that you can test various configurations, make sure everything works well. And that means that as a workstation, they live inside of your network. So they're just like any other laptop, any other computer that you might be running. Now, we have a bunch of these, obviously. We have a lot of developers. We need a bunch of dev kits. So a special challenge is not only securing them against theft, that can be done, right? Secure transporting, locking down your building appropriately. Sensible dev kits should be locked when office hours are over and such. But as a device on the network, they can be completely exposed. And a few of the critical things, you can't run an AV on them. It's true, Xbox runs a flavor of Windows 10. The PlayStation runs a customized flavor of a Unix-based system. But you can't just get some anti-malware engine off the web, install it, and hey, I'm good to go. Any file that might be suspicious will get scanned because they just don't work. There's nothing you can purchase off the market either, like a third-party solution. You don't have any sort of EDR. You can't install any type of agent, any type of small tool that will track or report or scan or anything like that. So that's out of the question as well. And they don't have any sort of possibility for remote lockdowns or joining domains and getting policies from your domain, which again means that basically they're just on the network, accessible, and unless you do specific stuff to lock them down, they're going to be open systems that can be used for pivoting inside of the network. So, for example, what we've been doing to fix this, I'm not sure about other gaming industry members, but our solution was to do it custom. So we have a custom-built solution that basically navigates the network, tries to find dev kits, and exploit them. So it does a proof of concept exploit. It tries to run a script and get a return value from that. Nothing too fancy. The fancier part of it is that it also attempts to lock down the dev kit. So once it's found it and confirmed that it's exploitable and you can actually use it as a pivot point inside of the network once you've gained perimeter access, it basically pushes a configuration set to the actual console that locks it down, sets an administrator password, and if I'm not mistaken, the latest feature is that it emails the administrator, so the administrator account that logged into the console last, hey, we changed your password, reach out to us so we can get it unlocked. Other than that, the only solution that we actually came up with was to do network segmentation, so trying to isolate all of the dev kits from everything else both ways. So that's a bit challenging. Again, we need to be dynamic. We have a super vast development environment, all kinds of tools, build pipelines, everything you can imagine. So doing the segmentation is a bit tricky. We've been working it out pretty well so far, but it's not really 100% set in stone right now. It's very promising though. So this is something I mentioned initially, that we're going to talk about stuff that's a bit more unique to the gaming industry. Consoles on the network are one of these considerations, and companies that build stuff for consoles really need to make sure that if they use dev kits, they are not leveraged as pivot points within their network itself. All right, this was supposed to be my introduction slide, so this is where I slide in one more time. So, a bit about me then, if we're at this point. I'm the tech lead for the security engineering team at EA. The full name, and that was a poor choice of color on my behalf. The full name of my department is the Game and Platform Security Engineering Team. So basically our responsibility is games and all the services that support the games, and the platforms themselves. So this means Nintendo Switch, PS, PlayStation, Xbox, PC, mobile phones, Android, and iOS, obviously. So anything that deals with this is our responsibility in terms of ensuring that the products that we release and the platforms that we release them on are secure. So it's not just web applications, obviously. Games are complex software. Thick clients are generally C++ and other low-level languages. You need speed. You want 60 frames per second and 60 hertz communication with the server. So you need a programming language that's low-level and can run fast. You have 300 libraries being loaded and graphics engines and physics engines and all of that. So we do pen tests on all of the applications that are produced within the company. We do source code reviews, right, checking for all of the generic stuff, buffer overflows and whatnot. On top of that, as I mentioned previously, there's the aspect of consoles, right? So how do you develop and how do you do source code review for an application that's meant to run on a PlayStation or an Xbox One console? Generally, it's pretty similar. I mean, you're still looking for exactly the same type of vulnerability. Exploitation becomes a bit more complicated, whereas on PC, it's pretty straightforward. You have documentation. There's been so many exploits and ASLR and all of that you can bypass, etc. Consoles are locked down. Documentation is available for us as a collaborator of their, of their platforms. But they don't go into so much technical detail that you can be 100% sure that, hey, I found a vulnerability, but it's not exploitable because the hardware in itself is locked down in such a way that it won't allow exploitation, or maybe I can't even set execution on a memory page that I'm in right now, etc. And the latest thing, which we actually debuted pretty recently, cloud gaming. So the concept is pretty simple. You have a very thin client running on your machine. Technically, right now that is not the case, but technically it could be as simple as a TV, right? A smart TV. And everything is run on the server. What you get is streamed video, and what you send back are streamed inputs. So basically anything you input from your controller directly just gets piped into the server. Now, this is a new technology space for us. I know other industries are very mature in the cloud side. We also have cloud infrastructure and manage it, but this concept of dynamic streaming constantly is something new, and it opens up a new sector of vulnerabilities that we were previously not accustomed to. Fortunately, we have it under wraps, so we did figure it out, and we had gigantic architecture reviews and security reviews. But it is a new class of vulnerability, so it's something special that we're on the lookout each time our developers do something new for the cloud environment. Anti-piracy, all right. So I mentioned game and platforms. Obviously, since we're responsible for the games as well as the platforms they run on, anti-piracy is also something that we are concerned with. The three major aspects of anti-piracy: diminishing returns. Everything will get cracked, period. There's no debate about it. Took me 2.5 years to convince people at EA that there's no uncrackable, there's no anti-tamper solution that will just fix it and you're going to be able to not have a cracked game for 50 years or something like that. So it's all about the diminishing returns. Minimize performance impact. Anti-tamper tends to be quite performance intensive, and when you're talking response times of 2 milliseconds and 60 frames per second, it can get a bit tricky. Minimize player annoyance at the same time, so you want it to run everywhere. If somebody reinstalls the game on a different configuration, it also has to run appropriately. Licensing checks, everything has to flow without any friction to players. And maximize time on market. So once it's been cracked, the revenue that you get from a title will probably decrease. So the idea is to have as much time from launch as possible until it will eventually get cracked. The anti-tamper in itself is a complicated discussion for gaming companies, and I'm sure for other companies as well, but this is my area of specialty, gaming in itself. So we at EA had a very long debate in which we weighed the pros and cons of building our own anti-tamper versus purchasing a third-party anti-tamper off the market. So something like Denuvo or Arxan, VM Protect, stuff like that. Now, today we still use a third-party component. Developing an anti-tamper is no easy business. You need quite the team to actually get something that you can trust for more than 3 hours after you launch the game. So we're still going for third-party stuff. We've had a very good collaboration with Denuvo in our case. They have a very interesting solution, but for us, maybe other companies disagree, but for us, going third-party is still the best choice today. And finally, one important thing, regardless of which method we approached, one important thing for us was to be tuned in. So that means tracking latest developments, making sure we know when a crack is released, making sure we measure what kind of average time we get between the release of a game and the day that it was cracked. It's just another form of threat hunting, a very basic one, that's true, but it's just scouring the web and all of the common resources and the more uncommon resources like forums, Discord channels, stuff like that, to get information as soon as it becomes available. And finally, one more topic, and this is really getting into really specific gaming problems now. Anti-cheating, or the problem of ensuring that everyone has a fair and fun experience and nobody has an unfair advantage over the other players in their game. That graph, which unfortunately is a bit not that clear, but it's a graph from Bloomberg. The article that it's lifted from discussed the amount of players that have been departing a very popular game, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. It's a battle royale game. And it's the number of players that were driven away by cheaters. So there was a survey conducted, and the game has an in-game survey as well. Why people abandoned over a certain time scale, I think it was 6 to 12 months, why they abandoned playing the game. And the main reason was the prevalence of cheaters inside of the environment, inside of the game. It's pretty frustrating for you to spend 30 minutes on a match and then some guy teleports in front of you, shoots your character, and then you're dead and out of the game, and whoa, what was that? So it's a big problem for gaming companies, and the whole, let me say, the whole issue revolves around detection and prevention. So you want to detect players who are actively cheating, and you obviously want to try to prevent them from cheating, usually on a technical level, so actually disabling cheats or making sure that cheats can't function correctly. Now, it is special in that it's only a gaming problem, but it's also, there are commonalities with malware. The modus operandi of most cheats is very similar to malware from certain perspectives. So every cheat has to somehow access a different process, the game process, and they do that in two ways. They either open a handle and do like read process memory, write process memory stuff, or a common malware technique, they inject a DLL, open a thread, and then run the DLL inside of the context of the actual game process, right? So what do you need to actually figure out how to fight cheating? You need to know reverse engineering, because you probably will just get the cheat, have it inject, take a memory dump of the game with the cheat inside and analyze that, for example. You need to understand the concept of DLL injection, how it actually runs. So the skill set in itself, if you know anti-malware, probably with like a small seg into a few unknowns, you will be capable of understanding cheats as well. The biggest difference, and this is an unfortunate one, is that compared to malware, cheats are run voluntarily, right? So somebody will just download the executable, double-click it, because they want to cheat in a game. Whereas with malware, you need to also take care of the vector. How do you convince somebody to double-click it? Well, here it's no concern. They will voluntarily double-click it. So cheating can be a bit weird since it's such a specific problem, and if you're not a gamer, like, hey, why is that even that interesting? Why would you even spend time, money, resources on fixing something like that? For one, it's incredibly frustrating for players. I, as a gamer, have been frustrated an immense number of times by cheaters in the various games I was playing. But more recently, with this evolution of gaming as an industry and with all of the competitions around it, took this snippet from Reuters, the latest Fortnite World Cup had as a grand prize $3 million. All in all, the tournament, I think, paid out $100 million to all of the participants. So just actually participating at the Fortnite World Cup that happened this year guaranteed you $50K US dollars. So cheating within the context of an esport event could be a potential problem, because the PR and all of that, if it turns out that somebody cheated and won a tournament, but most importantly, it's the image that you present, right? If your game is insecure from a cheating perspective, people won't be tempted to play it because they know they will never have a fair playing ground, and then there's nothing fun about it, right? In soccer, if the other team would be allowed to pick up the ball and run with it, doesn't really work out, right? So their incentive for cheating is actually is slowly becoming monetary gain. Until now, it was just either annoying other players or the challenge of reverse engineering the game and getting your cheat to work. But it's moving into more financial aspects now. And that kind of wraps it up. These are the more interesting topics that we deal with in terms of security as a gaming company. So I'll pass it along to the link where you can go if you want to find out a bit more details, and to Q&A if anybody has any questions.
All right, guys, thank you so much. So we have one question here.
Hello, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Unfortunately, I'm not playing, but my son does. So what I'm interested in, when these players cheat, so as I understand, maybe I don't understand it correctly, but as I understand, it's some problem in implementation, yes? So after you make the game, I think you have to make, yes, a proper pen test and all this stuff to deny this cheating. Why it doesn't work like this?
So cheating is a problem on PC. It doesn't really happen on like lockdown consoles, and it's not an implementation issue, it's an issue of how Windows works, right? Windows exposes certain APIs that allow you to read and write process memory. They expose create remote thread API, which allows you to, from one process to another, spawn a thread and run that code. Cheating is possible because of architectural computer functionality. It's not something, it's not a bug in our code, it's just how PCs work, and it's mostly Windows, because that's like 99% of the pie for cheating is PC gaming on Windows operating systems. If there were no APIs that allowed you to do inter-process communication, you couldn't cheat, technically. I mean, sure, this is a bit narrowing it down, but it's not a vulnerability in the game code, it's just how computers work. And what we do about it is to, again, like I mentioned, detect it. So for example, detect the foreign DLL running in your code, or even prevent it if you have the technology to strip writes from an open handle, for example. When the process opens a handle, if you strip certain writes from it and it can't actually read or write process memory, then you also kind of prevented that cheat from working. But it's not as simple as read my code and fix something there, because it's just not going to work like that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So we will take a question there. So we have a problem with the spare mic. I don't know who was first. I don't know. You were first.
Hi, thanks firstly for your presentation, and secondly for having finally Romanian First League in FIFA 20. Coming back to security-wise, I know that Lenovo has kind of issue, and from gamers' perspective, lately the time it's not that large, like in between you launch a game and it's cracked. Have you reconsider, and it's of course most used in your games.
Yeah.
Have you considered moving to another third party or improving this kind of
Improving,
anti-tampering?
yeah, constantly. Moving to another third party, it's always a consideration. We just want the best. I personally just want the best technology. Unfortunately, and this is my own personal opinion, so this is not reflective of EA's stance in any way, I don't think there's a better solution on the market today. And you're right. I think the last one was 3 days or something. That's not a fantastic amount of time. But that's just the situation, and that's why I felt it's important to propagate the concept that it's not uncrackable. Don't base anything that you're working on the fact that it's not going to get cracked for a certain amount of time.
I know, but I suppose it costs a lot of money for you guys. Like if it takes, you launch the game and it takes 2 or 3 days to crack it, to crack the Denuvo anti-tampering, it's your loss.
That's the situation, that's the industry, and that's the status quo. We're always trying to improve, but it's not always possible, especially in, like, I would call 6 months for improving an anti-tamper a very short time span. And our reaction time realistically is probably not 6 months, but maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and that's just unfeasible sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
So one hand raised there. 2 more questions, okay? Okay.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. About the anti-piracy, anti-tamper topic, have you ever thought about going DRM free? They will crack the game anyway.
Yeah, again, I can't really speak to EA's stance on that. It's been a consideration, but it's, in a company so big, it's sometimes difficult to actually get everything set in stone as you might want it to. So, yeah, I can't really speak to that on the record.
Okay.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. Do you think that when cloud gaming will be implemented, cheating will be still possible in the cloud?
Yeah, they're going to sniff network packets, figure out which packet means what input action. Then they're going to scan the screen. I mean, it's already been done. It's called a pixel cheat. So it basically scans the screen, understands what's on the screen. They use a bit of ML sometimes to actually make it move a bit faster. And then it's just a matter of sending the appropriate packets down the pipe. So I'm pretty sure cheating will still be a thing, only it's going to be a bit more complicated to actually get done.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can we take one more? I know everybody wants to go to lunch, but it's so exciting, isn't it? Okay, so we have this gentleman here.
Nice presentation. What I have to ask is about the future platforms, gaming platforms. Let's say that the 5th generation is around the corner. It has a hardware solution. But let's look further into the future, like the 6th generation, where there will not be a hardware solution available. Google already has stepped into this realm with Google Stadia. Let's say if EA has a solution of this standard moving into the cloud gaming service, will that be a more secure realm or more secure, let's say, environment for EA to deliver game services in the future?
That's a very interesting question, actually. Yeah, I think it would be. And the main thing is that you're no longer running that thick client on the players/customers machine, which means that you're not running 1 million lines of code that could have vulnerabilities inside of them on the machine. You're running it on the server. An exploit, switching to cloud gaming, exploits become, I think, less likely, more impactful, but the upside is that instead of impacting our customers and our players, they're just going to impact us, and it's going to be on us to fix it, since we can ensure that the light client is locked down and solid, and then it's just a matter of making sure our servers are locked down and solid. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of moving to cloud gaming if we're strictly talking about securing our players and our customers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mihai and Razvan. Let's give them some...